One of the forms of automation that is sometimes overlooked is recurring transactions. Recurring transactions have been available in accounting software for many years and can be a useful form of automation for some businesses. So if we go to the little gear here in the top right in QuickBooks, you'll see under lists here we've got a recurring transaction list, and that's where once we've created recurring transactions we would see the list of the transactions that we've got in the recurring section. And when we click, and at the moment we've nothing sat in here, but what we will do is create a recurring transaction so we can see that appear in the list. So recurring transactions can be useful for certain types of business. They're particularly useful if you're in the kind of business where you're producing invoices for customers and it's the same amount, it's repetitive every month, and you might consider recurring that particular invoice transaction. So if we go to the little search feature here, I'm just going to bring up an invoice I did earlier, and this particular invoice we created on the first of the month, and it's a monthly retainer and it repeats every month for us. So rather than create this entry every month and remember to create it, we can actually go to the entry that was created here, and at the bottom we've got this enable recurring payments. So on all transaction forms in here, invoices, bills, expenses, those initial input forms, we have got the option to enable recurring. So in this case, if I click on enable recurring payments, it's going to offer me a recurring schedule for this particular invoice. So it's named the template after the customer, and I could schedule this to happen every month, just put it in as a reminder, or just put it in and store it in my recurring list so that I can go and pick it out when I need it. But if I want to schedule this one and say just create it every month for me, I can do that. I can even say create it in advance of the date. So perhaps a couple of days in advance we might get this created. We can specify the information in here. So the customer is done, we could put his email address in there, and we could automatically send this when it's created. And here we can specify the intervals. So we can say on the first day of the month, we've already created our one for this month, so we'll start the next month. And if we got a particular schedule of a duration, we can actually set an end date, or we can just let it run. And then the information here is the information that's on the original transaction for us, and if we were happy with that, we can click in the bottom here and save the template. So that template is saved to automatically reoccur, and we can see we're back on our recurring transaction list, and we've got here this scheduled invoice that will next arise on the first of the next month. And I've got options here on this list to use it. It's scheduled, so it will automatically use anyway, duplicate it, pause it, skip it, delete it. So I've got options in there to change actions on it. Equally, I can go to edit and change the setup of that particular recurring transaction if I wish, and I'm back to my settings. I can change the number of days in advance, etc., that I might want that to action. So that's where you can set recurring transactions, and you get a list of those recurring transactions. One word of warning is you need to give consideration when you're setting these recurring transactions up, because we want to avoid duplication. If you're going to set recurring transactions up for expenses, which you can do at the bottom of an expense form, is that going to clash with the information coming in from your bank feed? Are you happy that you'll have to match these transactions to transactions created through the recurrings rather than add them in through the bank feed? So consider when you're using recurring transactions, which are the transactions in your business that are appropriate. And certainly it's very useful for people who are invoicing regularly to clients the same amount. That's a principal time I would suggest that this is used, but it can be used for recurring bills because that's not going to duplicate with anything from the bank feed. So recurring bills could also, regular bills could also be put in this way. So we get the bill appearing automatically, or it's in the schedule. We can also use recurring transaction to schedule things like journals, where we might have a journal that happens every month, and we might want to bring it back, perhaps change the figures. So it can be useful for month-end transactions done by journal as well. So that's just a summary of one of the overlooked automations, if you like, but one that's been around for many years, which is your recurring transactions.